Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Today we have come together to take a very close and practical look at what the 10 ox herding pictures stand for, how we can use them in our practice. Just for your information, what we talk about tonight is in Korean Shibudo, and you can find it in many sources. And as I was doing my research, it stunned me how many kinds of interpretation there are for the Shibudo. And let me briefly outline what we are not doing tonight. We will not launch any theory what the Shibudo may be. We will not give any theoretical background or historical background or aesthetic analysis what the Shibudo may stand for. What I can do, and probably the only thing I can do, is to describe the Shibudo, the 10 ox herding pictures, from a practical point of view as we practice meditation, how it works, how it functions, how it can help our practice. This is the first picture. The title usually is Looking for the Ox. That's what happens when we ask our first questions, what is our path? So the ox is actually a very interesting metaphor, because it contains our karma and our true self at the same time, as you will see presently. Looking for the ox means that we make our first steps on the path. We start to look, we start to search for something more than just the world, with something more than the eyes, the ears, the nose, tongue, and the body can comprehend. Okay? More than the five senses, more than the sixth consciousness, our thinking, and more than our judgmental mind, the seventh, or our memory, the eighth. So we are looking for something more than that. And what do we have in our search at first? There is a rope. We see a rope in our young student's hand, and that's something which we will use later in many ways. It's just correct that on the first picture you don't see the ox. It shows how unaware we are of ourselves as human beings. Even when we start to look, we don't see what we are looking for. We just know what we are looking for. We have an idea, we have some imagination what we will need to feel complete. The next picture is actually seeing the footsteps. Seeing the footsteps is an interesting stage because we still don't see the ox. But we already see the result of the ox, which is the footsteps, the hooves on the ground as the ox marches. So that's when human beings first comprehend cause and effect. That's when we first see what we are doing, but still we don't see the main point. We don't see our true self. We don't see the majority of our karma. What we see is just the prints. Okay? So that's when we realize what happens when we have anger, desire, and ignorance. Very first realization. It's like late teenager time. We are physically already grown, but no matter how clever we are, emotionally, we don't know ourselves. We don't know the world sufficiently. We have no life experience. But the first prints, the first sign of our cause and effect relationship to the world, that shows already, and that's the footprints. It also shows that the path is not something that we can grab so easily. It's not the first and not the second picture when we see the ox. Okay? It's coming on the third. Now, inevitably, when you see the Shibudo, the 10 ox herding pictures around Zen temples, in other cultures, inevitably you see the backside first, which is brown. Okay? So, why is it? First, when we start to practice, we really see the unpleasant part of our personality. Think about it. If you ever tried meditation, if you ever tried Suheng Pangbok, which is practical Zen, you don't see the nice part of your personality first. What really hits you is your strongest unfinished karma. And that is symbolized with the backside of the ox fully brown and just half of the body. You don't see the whole thing. You don't really understand yourself at first. So not only don't you see it at first, not only do you see only the prints second, when you start to really perceive what you are, you begin with the heaviest part of your karma. And that's why there are not that many practitioners compared to the amount of believers or non-believers or non-practitioners on earth, because it's not a pleasant business. But that's the way we grow. As the old Taoist wisdom says, good teaching is bitter, correct path seems to lead backwards. Remember that when you try something, and this is not a reason for pessimism. It's just a kind notification that you do not find yourself on the pure land in one step. It takes many steps, and it takes a lot of effort. So our young student is approaching the ox from the back with the rope in his hand. Now, the next one is actually struggling with the ox. Some interpretations say taming the ox, but we are quite far from it. This is not yet taming. This is struggling, okay? So you can see there's always a mountain somewhere in the picture, and there's always some abyss, some depth in the picture, and the ox tries both. It tries to pull you up, and it tries to pull you down, pulling you towards the mountain, pulling you towards the water or the lake or some deep abyss. It really points to our mistakes. It points to our extreme thinking. Because when you struggle with your karma, the whole brown ox, okay? When you struggle with your karma, then what do you really struggle with? You struggle with your dualistic thinking, with your dualistic emotions, everything which is putting you to the extremes. Extremely good, extremely bad, extremely high, extremely low, extremely happy, extremely unhappy. So when we start to use the rope correctly, then extreme thinking cannot control us. That's a really important point, because we believe that in practice there's something tangible to attain, something which we can show to our friends. But when you really start looking inside and asking this question, what am I? Then it turns out that the only thing you can get is freedom from your dualistic thinking. Okay? So this is an important stage and not to be underestimated, although it's just the fourth of the 10, and later I have a surprise for you, because the 10 ox herding pictures is not necessarily 10. It can be more, and it used to be even less. We'll talk about that later. So here, the rope is tight. That's when people do, Samchonbe. That's when people do 3,000 bows and hours of Yombo, because they feel something is boiling. Something is coming out. It has to be cleaned up, otherwise our lives can fall apart. Now, this is a much better state. And actually, there's a lot of transition between the previous picture and this picture. Usually they call this the ox has been tamed. I would call it half the job done. Okay? Half the job done, which means first you get some wisdom. That's why the head goes white first. If you look at many versions of the picture sequence, sometimes there's a separate picture which shows that just the head is white. And sometimes even the front together. This one goes halfway. And that means that cleaning up your karma is gradual. Seeing the ox can be a moment. Discovering the footsteps can be also a moment. But working with your karma is definitely a gradual process, and we have to get down to that. We have to get used to that. We have to accept that this is not a job easy done, but if we don't do it, it will never get done. Then we don't even see the footsteps, let alone grabbing the rope, let alone taming the ox, let alone getting some wisdom out of it. So that's when your true self is starting to become free from your karma, which you carry on with yourself. And what's wonderful about the ox herding pictures is that it shows the change in color. That means originally you are always the same. But either your true self is covered with some thick karma or it isn't. That's a big difference. That's why there is the brown color. You identify with your karma. You are totally covered with it. You are carrying it. Or you cast it off. You left it behind. You became free from it. And then the brown disappears and the white appears. So it really shows clearly that the nature of enlightenment and suffering is the same. But enlightenment is enlightenment and suffering is suffering. It's a really important point. Next is complete harmony. The original title says riding the ox home. But at this point, there is no purpose. There is no destination. It's just complete harmony when you and your true self become one. And remember, we used to have the rope first tight, then loose, then we don't use it. Okay? Which means that the means of practice can be many kinds. First you do a lot of bows, a lot of yombo, a lot of sitting. But then you become more aware of yourself, your attainment deepens, and then you don't have to make external effort. I have to emphasize, external effort, not so much necessary. Practicing, still necessary. But external, big, formal effort, not so much. Then sitting changes. It becomes effortless. One set of meditation, usually 50 minutes, goes like one breath. And chukpi hits again. First, sitting seems to last forever. When you are in the tightrope state, then sitting, you couldn't believe that an hour can be so long. And at this point, it's a breath. It's finished. So that's why there's music. Usually music is accompanied with happiness. Yeah, there is sometimes sad music, but in this case, the fact that you can play the flute and you don't have to deal with the rope, that's definitely happiness. It's very clearly so. So it's riding the ox with harmony. And now we are getting to the phase when the dualities begin to disappear. Until now, we perceived of practice as I want to attain my true self. So I want to get the ox, grab the ox, tame the ox, and now the ox is gone. There is some deep wisdom in there. Because if you go and listen to the teaching very carefully, it says, originally your true self has no name, no form. Originally there is no ox. All right? And we have to realize that otherwise we become attached to the idea of awakening, to the idea of liberation. And we will believe for a long time that me and the ox are actually subject and object. No, the ox is ultimately you. And that's the message of this picture. Ultimately, the ox and you are not separate. That's why in the old Chinese wisdom, they just asked a very kind of keen Zen question, saying, how can you discover an ox on which you are sitting? Okay? So the resolution of this dilemma is right here. Originally, no ox. And that's what happens when even you disappear, because originally you also don't exist. Originally, we are not born and we don't die. But without the Zen circle, we would not remember that. In some interpretations, there is not even a Zen circle, just an empty big painting with some neutral background, and that's it. But human beings, us, are really attached to some idea. Still some kind of symbol necessary. But the difference between this and our previous sitting picture is tremendous. Which means this has no human form. This has no life, no death. Okay? So this is the point when you listen to Dharma talk and then the Zen teacher or the Zen master, they just hit the rostrum with a stick. Bam! Same point. But of course, when you look at a temple and you look at the wall of the Teunjon, it's impossible to put an audio clip always to hit, hit, hit. So the Zen circle stands for that. Next, you may wonder why anything is necessary after the Zen circle. The reason why something is necessary after the Zen circle is that it's not complete if you are just attain emptiness. If you become attached to emptiness, you cannot help other people. You cannot re-enter the world. And the Zen circle in our school's designation is called substance. Substance which has no name, no form, no coming, no going, no life, no death. Substance. This is when you attain the mind, which is clear like space, clear like a mirror. Then, in this clear mirror consciousness, sky is blue, trees are green, dogs are barking, cars are running in the street. So we call this truth. This is the second step. So truth realm, nature as it is. Or in some other designation, only like this. There is no viewer here. There is just seeing here. So the subject and the object, they disappeared in the previous 2 or 3 pictures. Then comes our master. Now, for your information and clarification, this master is the same as the boy, except 20 years past. Okay? So, seeing the truth, function appears. Where is he going? There is a home with some smoke coming out of the chimney. That means he enters the world. He enters the world of humans to help and teach those who have only just a little dust before their eyes. And this is supposed to be the 10th picture. And we would believe that this linear sequence is over here. But interestingly so, there is an 11th. And this 11th is the link between the 10th and the 1st. So please don't think about the 10 ox-herding pictures as a linear sequence. It's actually a circle. So then the master is teaching the students. What does the master teach the students? Really, the master teaches nothing but spiritual independence, correct direction, correct effort. That's what happens. He doesn't tell you who you are. He doesn't tell you the specifics, the details, only very important, large-scale, great teaching. So here the instructions are given, and then we go back to square one, where all these disciples, they start to look for the ox. They understand by the teaching that they have to make the effort themselves, they have to find their correct direction, and then we go back to square one, and then these little individuals, they, as disciples of the teacher, they start to look inside, they start to look for the path, to find the ox, to tame it, to become one with it, then let it disappear, then let yourself disappear, then perceive the truth and do correct action, correct function. So in brief, ladies and gentlemen, this was the Shibudo, the 10 ox-herding pictures. And after the presentation is over, and let's turn the lights back on, I would like to welcome your questions. It's too complete, right? What can you ask after this? So for your information, in Taoism, because this 10 ox-herding pictures comes from Taoist tradition, there used to be only 6 of them. It usually stops with the nature, and that's it. And the Zen circle is sometimes missing. I'm not sure exactly which 6 are always there, but 4 were put in by Buddhism, and there was an 11th which you saw, and very frequently it is there, so as to give the missing link between number 10 and number 1. So the 10 ox-herding pictures is really a combination of Taoism and Mahayana Buddhist tradition, and I have never seen such a succinct and clear and concise help of our practice. If you really have the 10 ox-herding picture as your guide, and you practice every day, you really cannot go wrong too much. If you don't start to follow your karma, you don't fall into the abyss or don't climb up to the mountain of pride. And then, if you don't follow your extreme views and you don't follow anything dualistic, then you really can ride the ox in complete harmony. Then you can really attain true nature. And then spontaneously you will teach all people, no matter what kind of exterior form you have or what kind of outside job you have. Because it's really the mind which teaches. It's not the words. It's not the form. It's not the way we look. Even not the way we talk. But mind to mind, we already have connection as human beings. So that is the real teacher. Okay? Any questions? Yes.
When you talk about this circle, you have to go through all this circle. Is it possible, like, this circle maybe go like this way, go smaller and smaller and smaller, because people keep on, if they learn more Buddhism and more people is teaching, and for other people it's going to be more easier for them. Maybe they can skip some step, or everyone has to go through all this struggling, try to...
Skipping some steps,
right? If more people learn about Buddhism, and maybe not everyone has to go through every step. It's not a circle like you have to go through this. Maybe for someone it's 5 steps, and for other people maybe just 1 step. I don't know.
It would be really a kind of calming, very quiet mind if you knew that you could skip some steps. But the news is you cannot.
So the answer is everyone has to go through this.
Yes, but let me just give you the good news. The good news is that not always, these steps, they are not for the same duration. You can go through some of them very quickly, some of them slowly, but the Zen circle doesn't get any smaller. Sometimes it's faster, sometimes it's slower, depending on how much karma you have. Let me give you an example. Our best and most human example is Shakyamuni Buddha himself, because he was born with a very powerful ox. But he had the whole brown thing. He was born as a prince, as a king's son. He was going to be a king. He got married. He had a son. And at 28, age 28, boom, he starts to look for the footprints after the trip from the palace. So he struggles for 6 years. And after 6 years, he's in the Zen circle realm. He's in the nature realm. He's in the function realm when he starts to teach people. But until then, he really had to struggle. He almost died. Not once, many times. So he really had to struggle. He really had to tame the ox. But his kind of very, very strong and hard practicing periods lasted for 6 years. After that, he never stopped practicing. No master ever does. Because they practice for all beings after their own karma becomes lighter or even disappears completely. So for him, this very hard part was 6 years. Now, Yukcho Desa, the 6th patriarch, he heard just 2 lines from the Diamond Sutra in the marketplace, and he immediately got to the Zen circle, all at once, boom! Okay? But still, he had to become Hengja. He had to get transmission. He had to roam around various parts of China for 17 years, and then he could become properly ordained, and then become the 6th patriarch. All right? So some parts are very, very long. Some parts are very short. But the message here is you cannot escape anything. There is no shortcut. You cannot skip anything. You have to go through the whole 9 yards. But I also have to tell you the legend, just to compare what it needs, what is really necessary. Legend has it that the 6th patriarch was practicing for 80 consecutive lifetimes before he was born in such a way that he just heard 2 lines from the Diamond Sutra. So if not this lifetime, then in some previous or future lifetime, you have to get down to business. And then the results show. So our true self is equal. Our Buddha nature is exactly the same. But our karma is different. If we had exactly the same karma, we would have to occupy the same time and same place. And that's impossible. So everybody is a little bit further than one another. Okay? So we don't have the same body, we don't have the same thinking, we don't have the same emotions. None of that is the same. When you are in a group, and next time next Saturday we'll talk about group karma with the Shibudo. Now that's going to be even more interesting. So when you have some broad similarities between people, then they are born all as Koreans. They are all born as Hungarians, all born as Americans, you know. So group karma means that there are basic similarities between people, but the individuals are still very different. Even twins in the same family are slightly different, okay? So that means that some of us are born with very thick brown crust on the white ox, and for some of us, not so thick. And like the sixth patriarch, he had basically just one little brown dot, and he heard the diamond suit, and boom, even that last brown dot disappeared. And his ox was shining bright, okay? So that's why, if I may humbly suggest, be careful what kind of karma you accumulate and identify with. In other words, be careful what you think you are. You identify with something, hardens on yourself, goes to next lifetime. You carry it because you're attached to it, you identify with it. Practically speaking, you think that you are that. And because of that, it becomes attached to you. There is no other reason. It's you. That means us. So if you stop identifying with your karma, if you stop attaching to your karma, it goes. Spontaneously it disappears. Why? It has no self-nature. It has no self-nature. It's not you originally. And that's what the Buddha found out 2,500 years ago, that originally this karma is not you. That's why the ox can become white. Otherwise it would stay forever brown. Okay? So that's why. No steps skipped, but some are faster, some are slower. Depends on you. Okay? Don't think of fast and slow. This society is ingraining this madness of speed, efficiency, cheap, you know, quick, pali. Effort necessary, correct direction necessary, and time and space will stop to matter. We have a job, and this job is very different from what you get money for. This job brings you to awakening. It doesn't matter how long it lasts. But if you make constant effort with correct direction and the mind which is on the middle way, there's no doubt that one day we get there. It can happen this moment, it can happen in this Mahakalpa, it can happen in the next Mahakalpa. It's our choice. Next question.
I heard many people are saying about this way, that way, maybe his own way, other way, but people could be wrong. So how do we know when we heard something whether he's talking right or wrong?
You don't know. You don't know whether it's right or wrong. But if you start practicing, then soon you will know whether the water you drink is warm or cold. And that's the start of the path, which means you can try many things, but only a few of them will work for you. So find the one which is challenging enough, rewarding enough, which kind of makes you change, and it makes you change in the right direction. The Buddha himself said, don't accept what I say because it was handed down by elders. Don't accept it because it is part of a tradition. You try it, and if it works in your life, please try to grow up to it. If it's not like that, if it doesn't work for you, discard it. So this is a very different approach from the kind of religious view that you must believe something and you don't know what to believe. Here in Zen, you don't have to believe anything, but you can try practicing. And that practice makes a difference. So the path is much more something to walk on rather than something to talk about. Now we talk because our intellect is like a hungry dog, and it likes the meat, it likes the food. And giving correct food to our intellect is an important job, but it's really, really just looking for the prints, looking for the footsteps. That's all it does. And then you try it, and you can see whether the rope is strong enough. If the rope splits, if it breaks apart, you cannot handle your karma, then it's not going to work. But make sure you try it long enough to prove that the problem is not with you, but the problem is that you and the tradition or the style of practicing are not compatible. or they are too compatible. Too compatible means you feel too comfortable from day one. That means you can fall asleep because the practice is too easy. You know? People have various kinds of consciousness. For some, yombul is very easy. For some, imagining something, very easy. For some, counting breath is very easy. For some other people, kongans are very easy. Like in our school, there is a very interesting story from Cambridge Zen Center, East Coast, Massachusetts, United States, when there was a kind of middle-aged woman, American, and she goes to one of the one-week Yongmeng Jonjins. Now, in our school, in the Quantum School of Zen, we have 10 gates, the 10 basic kongans. You can read about that, you know, in Sungsan Sunim's work. And that kind of gate or gateways are really essential. And most of us, we work on that for years. That's okay. That's part of our practice. That woman passes the 10 gates in 1 week. Then she says, Zen is boring. I'm going to practice something else. You know? So, genius or not, we can call it many ways, but it's clear that she had previous karma with these kongas. She already had it from some time before, because this lifetime, no practice. It's like a little bit the sixth patriarch. But she had that. It was no longer a challenge for her, so she has to find another way to make her leftover karma appear and then later disappear. Zen was not for her. It was not challenging enough. In other sense, the other extreme, when you sit and you just cannot handle it, because the practice that you got in that given tradition or in that given style is such that you don't have even one moment of solid presence. That means the rope snaps, and your karma just wants to pull you away, and you feel that something is really unclear inside. You want to go crazy, you want to go out, you have total sense of no inyo, no belonging. So the kind of middle way is necessary, which means you can do it, but it's not easy. It has challenge, and it starts to work on you from day one. And that's the correct choice. Don't start depending on people, whether you like them or not. Just see whether the teaching for you seems to be correct enough to trust it initially. Without trying, you will never know. Never. Don't let your thinking control your choice. Nobody ever died because they tried a given tradition for 1 day. Okay? Next question.
That is one that oxygen is your own property. So he tried to look for the ox, but he did not recognize that one is not mine, or he want to seek for the other's ox. That is a different case. He look for his own one, but in case he can look for the other's ox, or to...
That's a very bodhisattva question, Rejangnim, because you would imply that once you found your own ox, you could find the other's ox, because it's so much easier. No. Everybody's got to find their own. Which means, and now with this question we almost jump 1 week ahead, when you really find your ox, first, because it's all brown, first you think that is all yours. But as the ox becomes more and more clear, you see that in other people there is the same Buddha nature. So by the time it becomes completely white and completely clear, we realize that we are all sitting on the same ox. But as long as we have karma and we have attachment to our own idea, our own view, we believe that each of us will have one separate little ox, and we have a huge ox farm, and that's the pure land. No. So we are all sitting on one ox. But the moment that we become attached to our karma, we separate. We become individual. Then we believe that we have our own individual little ox, and then we want, okay, I have mine. Can I help yours? No. Everybody has to do their own job. Everybody has to discover their own karma. There is no exception. Remember the story with the Buddha and the woman whose child died soon after birth? She was kind of elder, and that was the only offspring she could have. And she was desperate. And she went to the Buddha and said, Lord, I know you have special powers. I know you attained full capabilities of the mind, so please resurrect my child. And then the Buddha says, yes, I'll do that for you, but I need a special ointment. I need mustard seeds from houses where there was no death. And if you bring those mustard seeds to me, I'll make a special ointment, and with that I can resurrect your child. So the woman is very sincere. And she starts to go around houses and say, please, if there was no death in this house, please give me just a few mustard seeds. And from everywhere, she realizes she gets the same answer. They say, the owners say, we are sorry, but in this house there was death this and this time ago. And everywhere she goes, I'm sorry, there was death in this house. I'm sorry, there was death in this house. So she goes back to the Buddha and bows to him and says, I'm so sorry. I realized your teaching. And then she could bury her child and become free from this. Okay? So this is really important because no one can take merited karma disappear, or no one can make merited karma disappear, only the one who made it. And you go through your merited karma. You go through the struggle. You go through the suffering. And then it disappears. There is no special magic that can make this karma disappear. It's a really important point because we come to the steps. Is there some kind of magic which I can type into my computer, press enter, and I'm free? No, there isn't. But there is a path to walk. There's a path to follow. And if we do that, then we can wake up. And that awakening helps because instinctively, when you look at practitioners, you can be inspired by the shine of somebody's white ox. You can be inspired. And you know that you can do the same thing to yours. Okay? Actually, one typical example when somebody doesn't get into the university where they want to go, or there's too much demand on them, even very high-class executives' children, they can commit suicide. It happened in the recent past. I don't want to name the company. You all probably know that. One of the strongest and most profitable company in this country, and the chief's son committed suicide. So this happens everywhere under the same circumstances. And let me name some of those circumstances. First, not enough human attention. That's number one. When we have this rushy, consumer-oriented, profit-oriented society, which is crazy about getting things done in a short time, with the highest efficiency, with the lowest cost, then human relationships are degrading. It has been proven, it has been observed. So first of all, these people feel isolated. That's number one. They cannot talk to somebody in detail. And it's not just this 5-10 minutes of talk over the dinner table. Hello, how are you? How was your day? Oh, fine. Thank you very much. Let's watch TV. That's not the talk I'm talking about. It's something which Korean culture still has when people sit down and they drink some tea, they share some food, and there is time to pay attention to each other. Korea still has that, much more than Western cultures. But even in Korea, there are these fractures. There are these signs that in some areas or in some segments of society, especially in the most westernized segments of society, this culture is declining, and it's very sad. Remember, some people here are old enough to remember the aftermath of the Korean War. And it was very hard. Hundreds of thousands of people died. The country was in ruin. It had to be rebuilt. Very few people committed suicide. There was something to live for. There were people with whom you could struggle for something much better. And then people feel that they have purpose in their lives. So first, which I mentioned, the lack of attention. Next is lack of purpose. So most of these people, they are either very underprivileged and they see no purpose because they cannot move forward, or they are so high up that they have everything. Then they have a problem, they become isolated. And after not enough attention, and after the lack of purpose, then comes the basic ignorance that they identify the mind with the body. So they want to punish the body when they would have a job with their minds. Okay? So these three things, lack of attention, lack of purpose, and lack of wisdom. And this lack of wisdom teaches them or suggests to them that if you kill the body, your mind problem will end. That is not true. So once people get this wisdom, and I have two cases, two very explicit cases, one from Slovakia and the other from Hungary. Both people were non-practitioners. They just came to the Zen center. They came to Yongmeng Jonjin, and both of them were just at the beginning. At the end. At the very end. And then we talked. We talked with each of them 1.5 hours to lay it out completely what the problem is, what the cause of the problem is, what the solution of the problem is, and what is the way to this solution. Does this sound familiar? It's the Four Noble Truths. So once you really start to pay attention to people and you have this clear diagnostic view, non-judgmental diagnostic view, like in a hospital. So what's the sickness, the cause of the sickness, the cure, and how to apply that. So once that becomes clear, first they become calm. They really start to understand cause and effect. But these individuals that you are mentioning, again, they didn't receive enough attention. They didn't receive some kind of view, some kind of directions, that is a purpose in life. And unfortunately, they are still ignorant about the relationship between body and mind, and also the nature of life and death. If they truly understood that, they would look elsewhere. They wouldn't want to kill this body, no matter how hard life may seem to be at some point. They would stop identifying with their dualistic emotions and dualistic thinking. I mean, most of us in our adult lives, we're in critical conditions sometimes. And when your intellect cannot provide a solution, and you are emotionally depressed, then intellect and emotions together, they're both dysfunctioning or malfunctioning. That's the recipe for disaster. All right? So when you don't identify with your emotion and don't identify with your thinking, you can see it like in a mirror, even if just a little bit. Then there is enough white spots on the ox so that you wouldn't want to kill the ox. But you would look for a very strong brush and scrape off more of the brown stuff. Okay? Because you cannot tell somebody who is really, really down and really determined to kill himself or herself that what you're doing is wrong. You cannot just tell that right away. You just add fuel to his or her fire, this negative fire which burns himself or herself. And you really have to be on their side, which is kind of paradoxical, right? How can you be on a suicidal person's side? Well, with compassion. You understand their minds. You really suffer with them, and that's the first step. And when you suffer with them in your mind and you really kind of get their causes and conditions, then you can start pointing them to the right path. Because before that, they don't believe in you. They really don't believe that you can have a meaningful conversation with them. Because what do most people do when they see a depressed person or a suicidal person? They develop some distance. It's self-defense. They want to develop that distance so that you don't get into that karmic vortex, into that situation, that emotional and intellectual situation, which that other poor person has. And a practitioner's approach or a teacher's approach is the diametric opposite. You're suffering in there, I'm jumping in right there. But with a life buoy, with the Dharma. And if you want, you can grab that, like the turtle meets the ship in the sea. You can use that to get out of the sea of suffering. And most people want to. Most of these desperate people still want to. And the second one, the Hungarian, didn't even become a practitioner. He's a grown-up man, and And he has very different karma. But he still comes to Won Kwang Sa. He still sees us. It's really interesting the way it works. Thank you very much.